Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke is scheduled to travel to New Mexico soon to meet with officials and community members about these monuments, but we don't have a firm date on that yet. Today, I'm joined by Michael Casas. He's State Director in New Mexico for the Wilderness Society, and Karen Cowan. She's Executive Director of the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, why has the Wilderness Society supported the designation of these two areas as national monuments?
Well, both the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks and the Rio Grande del Norte National Monuments are just beautiful, spectacular, iconic landscapes. There's a long human history on both landscapes. Up north, over 10,000 years, one of the oldest continually inhabited landscapes on the continent. Tremendous ecological values. It's a very important avian flyway where tens of millions of birds migrate each year. And also the human element is also written on the land in terms of petroglyphs, pictographs, and other prehistoric structures. In the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, a similar long human history, over 9,000 years, tremendous ecological values. And in that case, there's just some really cool historical landmarks, 20 miles of the Butterfield Stagecoach Trail, Aden Crater, Kilbourne Hole, where the Apollo astronauts trained. And so there's a mix, a really wonderful mix of cultural, historical, and scientific values that not only the Wilderness Society wanted to protect, but the broader community at large was very interested in.
Were they facing immediate threats? I mean, those things have been there for a long, long time. Were they threatened? Is that why they need this protection?
A lot of the prehistoric artifacts, especially the pictographs and petroglyphs, have been experiencing graffiti, for example, over the years. But what we've learned in the conservation movement is that if you wait for an immediate threat, it's often too late. The efforts to protect both of these national monuments were decades in the making, and if we would have waited for an immediate threat to happen, it would have been too late at that time.
Karen, I know that your members of the Cattle Growers Association are concerned about, especially the Organ Peaks,
yes.
The Organ Mountains Desert Peaks Monument. Why is that?
Because of the sweeping nature of it, mostly. We respect monuments, and monuments are usually something that's site-specific and contained that way. The Oregon Desert is, depending on whose numbers you look at, between 400 and 600,000 acres, and we believe that's just too sweeping. There needs to be a narrow focus on what needs to be protected, because when you're trying to protect too much, you may not protect anything. And most of our members have been on this land for generations, and they've been protecting it, or it wouldn't be there now.
Michael, many are critical that these monuments are created using the Antiquities Act. President Trump actually called it an abusive practice because it allows the president to designate an area as a national monument without going through the congressional process and having debate and input. Is there a better way? I think you guys and others started with the congressional process before they were designated under the Antiquities Act.
Well, in terms of the Antiquities Act, Congress did give a sitting president the authority to designate national monuments, areas of historical, cultural, and scientific interest. Our original preference and the community's preference was to actually get Congress to permanently protect these landscapes through federal legislation. In the case of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, going back to 2009, bills were introduced by our senators to protect this landscape as a national conservation area with wilderness within it. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get the votes. We couldn't even actually get a vote on any of those pieces of legislation. For Rio Grande del Norte, legislation dates back actually to 1991, and again in 2009, legislation was introduced to protect that landscape. So when Congress failed to act, the community decided to take democracy into their own hands and appeal directly to the president, which is what the Antiquities Act allows communities to do.
Karen, I know there were a number of public meetings, even though technically under the Antiquities Act, they don't necessarily have to be held, but there were a number of public meetings. around these monuments. Did your members participate in that process?
Absolutely.
And did they feel like they were heard?
The people in the north, we have one or two members that have called and expressed concerns, but by and large, it appears that the community came together and did what they wanted to do. We tend to be concerned about the breadth of that designation as well, but our members who drive our policy seem to be satisfied, with some exceptions. With the Otero or the Organ Mountain designation, we have numerous members that have come to the association and asked for help and asked for policy to try to shrink this down or eliminate it. I mean, we support either stance, but we support first of all what our members want, and our members feel like they simply were not heard.
They feel like they weren't heard, like they went to the meetings.
They went to the meetings. They've spoken. I hear a lot about there being this designation being a compromise. Our members don't feel there was compromise there.
Michael, some of these monuments are really large. I mean, in general, the ones around the country. And Organ Mountains is like, as we said, maybe about 500,000 acres. Why does it need to be so big?
Well, first to address Karen's point about compromise and listening to the concerns from the ranching community, I truly respect the ranching industry and the people in that community, and because of that, we actually tried our best to work with them, and I feel strongly that we actually did address their concerns. Grazing rights was written into President Obama's proclamation. Grazing is allowed to continue. Grazing is happening today and will happen into the future. Sportsman community was also concerned about hunting. In many national monuments, you're not allowed to hunt, but we took their concerns into consideration, and the president wrote hunting into the proclamation, and that use is also allowed. In terms of the size of the national monuments, it's not unprecedented for presidents to designate large national monuments. In 1908, President Roosevelt designated the Grand Canyon National Monument. That was over 800,000 acres, huge landscape at that time. So
there were far fewer people in the West at that time.
That's true. So when the community came together to draw the boundaries of both national monuments, it was based on years of extensive field work, scientific information, and we feel confident that those boundaries were sufficient and that smallest size compatible to protect the resources that are in that area. When it comes to not only human artifacts that are protected within these landscapes, I think it's important that the Antiquities Act allows presidents to protect areas of scientific interest. Both of these landscapes are of scientific interest. The ecology, the geology, the wildlife habitat of these areas make it so that the size was necessary to protect those resources.
Karen, I know that your members fear the impact of the monument on their businesses, their livelihood. There was a report by Headwaters Economics looking at the impact on communities of national monuments around the country, and it found that areas near public lands often attract fast-growing economic sectors, and there are more visitors, and that increases revenues for industries that serve them. It seems like this has potential to really help our struggling rural communities.
I guess we just don't see it that way.
Okay.
Our members participated, their concerns, they're still concerned. So clearly their concerns were not addressed. There's 80,000 acres of state and private land that are contained in the Organ Mountains Monument. There is a significant amount of land within the Del Norte Monument, enough that the State Land Office and the BLM are working on a trade-out of lands so that the State Land Office can, the BLM will have the land up there that may or may not include grazing, and the State Land Office will have BLM lands which elsewhere that contain grazing. So, and there's a lot of uncertainty about where this goes. The monument was designated 3 years ago, but we still don't have any kind of a management plan. We don't have a list of the significant things that the Antiquities Act requires that are going to be covered. There may be grazing on monuments, we don't disagree with that. But we've found over time that when these federal designations come in, eventually you find an endangered species or something else that does severely limit the use of the land. And most ranches are comprised of state, federal, and deeded land. So anything that you do on the federal land is going to have impact on the other, and they're checkerboarded in many cases. It's going to have impact on the operation as a whole.
These management plans that monuments have to have, Michael, so how is public input used to develop them? These are both, we don't have the plans yet for either of these, I believe.
Not yet, but,
Okay.
in the case of the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, that management plan has been ongoing over the past several years. The monument plan for the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks has yet to begun, but we hope to begin that shortly. And not only will there be public input throughout that management planning process, there was public input into the development of the national monuments themselves. For decades, local community members have advocated for protecting these landscapes. There have been dozens and oftentimes hundreds of stakeholder meetings with interested parties in both areas. And so I look at the management plan as yet another opportunities for communities, including the ranching community, to come to the table to ensure that their concerns, which are very real, are addressed in the management plan. I'm confident that that final management plan will include the continuation of grazing and hunting and the many uses that people are enjoying today.
So Karen, how can we balance protecting these beautiful landscapes, which I know ranchers care about because they live there.
That's where they live. Yeah.
That's how they make their living.
Yes.
While ensuring those who rely on the land can make a living and protect the landscape as well.
I think that the scope of these the Oregon Mountain designation, when they're so sweeping and they don't know what they're even protecting yet, it's hard to understand or know how to proceed. I understand that yes, we will have another opportunity, or more opportunities, hopefully more than one, to participate in the management plan, and we look forward to that. But the track record thus far has our families and our members very fearful of what comes next, and the uncertainty is half of the problem. People have borrowed money to buy these ranches. They've invested their lifetimes, invested their kids' lifetimes and futures in this land. And the kind of uncertainty that they're living with today takes a true toll on everything that's going on.
Well, the Interior Department is accepting public comment on the creation of these monuments through July 10th, and you can find a link to that on our website. Thank you, Michael Casas and Karen Cowan, for coming and talking about this.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.